Welcome back, everyone, to the Fantasy Crossover Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Duarte, joined here by my co host, Brian Acevedo. And today, what we're doing is we are kicking off week 3 of the NBA 2021-2022 season. So, guys, we've looked at our formatting, we've taken some feedback, and we're just going to tweak it up a little bit. So instead of doing recaps, we're going to break it down and just top waiver ads and things of that nature. We're just going to break it down to more digestible segments. The recaps were taking a little bit longer, so we hope you enjoy the new format. We hope you enjoy kind of the new topics we're going to discuss. So a very quick summary of what we're going to recap and what we're going to discuss today. The first thing is going to be our most unexpected players. It's kind of a recap of the nightly games, just who really stood out to us for those nightly games. And then next, we're going to jump into injuries that you need to be on the lookout for. Then we're going to take a dive into the top waiver ads / drops. And we're going to do a quick weekly schedule preview in terms of just all the teams, how many games they play, things of that nature. And then lastly, we're going to do an ice cold hot hand segment where we look at one player that we each think is going to have kind of a rough week, and then one player we each think is going to have a really great week. So, without further ado, Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can start with your MUPs, your most unexpected players.
All right, guys. So very excited to debut the segment. So most unexpected player, we're going to go Friday and Saturday's games. So for Friday, my most unexpected player was Tory Craig from the Indiana Pacers. Kind of surprised me too when I was looking through the numbers. So Tory Craig had 28 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 assists. He also shot 9 of 16 with 4 threes. Now, we all know Tory Craig. He's kind of been a journeyman over the years. I don't know how sustainable it's going to be, especially with Karis LeVert being back. This is a guy who's averaging 6 points, 3 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game in just 16 minutes this year. This game was pretty much an anomaly, and if you had him rostered in your league by chance, you were definitely pleasantly surprised. Again, though, I do consider this performance more of a blip than sustainability from Tory Craig. It also didn't lead to a win for the Pacers, which has also been a trend for them this year. But it's definitely encouraging for them to see that they can occasionally get a blow up game like that from Tory Craig. For Saturday's games, I had Kyle Kuzma as my number one. He had 17 points and 17 rebounds with 2 threes and 2 blocks. I know we had a couple of other guys. RJ Barrett was someone else that stood out. 35 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists with 6 threes on 12-18 shooting. Again, not sure how consistent that performance is going to be, but you definitely love to see him taking the mantle over there in New York. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, so definitely agree with you on Tory Craig kind of being an anomaly, kind of an outlier performance, but still, it's great to call him out as your MUP for Friday. My MUP for Friday, I got to give it up to my guy Mo Bamba. Bamba has been on a tear this year. Friday was no exception. He put up 14 points, 18 rebounds, 5 assists. He had 2 threes and 3 blocks. Guys, for context, Mo Bamba is ranked the 20th best fantasy player this season on a per game basis. He's averaged 2 threes per game. He's averaging 13 points, 9 boards, 2 assists, 2 blocks on 53% field goal percentage. I think we all agree that we didn't see him having top 150, performance ranking this year. He probably was like a late pick in your draft / maybe he was on the waiver wire. So anyone that owns him must be ecstatic at this point that he's putting up these ridiculous numbers. Then for Saturday, my MUP goes out to Kelly Olynyk from the Detroit Pistons. He put up 18 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists with 3 threes, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. Olynyk has been a pretty solid 6-man off the bench for the Detroit Pistons. He's ranked 101 in the fantasy league or in the league right now. He has 1 3 per game, 15 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, and 2 steals and 1 block. So again, this is a guy that was probably going in the later half of your draft. So for the production he's giving you right now, I think that he's definitely giving you he's performing beyond what you expected.
Yeah, man. Kelly O. It's funny, guys. Danny and I are actually playing against each other in 2 leagues this week. Danny actually has Kelly Olynyk in one of those leagues, and I was handling business, and then Kelly O came in on Saturday night and just tore everything up. Just a really well a well played game, a really balanced stat line, gave you defensive numbers and all that. So Kelly O, we talked about him at the beginning of the season. Like he was in our top 80 for a reason. Like we think this guy is really valuable. He had a great year last year, and so far, same thing. And I would say that the amount of minutes he's playing is kind of hurting Isaiah Stewart and his potential in Detroit. So just be prepared. If you have Isaiah Stewart, Kelly Olynyk is definitely going to be taking a few minutes away. And then as for Mo Bamba, real quick, he's actually doubled his minutes so far this year compared to his last best year. So a new coach in Orlando has kind of given Mo Bamba a fresh outlook, a fresh lease on his career down there. And it's kind of crazy to see that he's actually putting those numbers we used to see in preseason actually to work in the regular season. And I mean, I'll be honest, I think Mo Bamba's numbers are sustainable. Like this guy is, I think he's going to continue to put up those types of numbers.
I completely agree. I think Mo Bamba is going to be, when we reflect back on it at the end of the year, one of the steals, hands down, in any league whatsoever.
Facts, man. Facts. So with that said, we kind of finished reviewing the end of last week. Now we're going to go into injuries, some that affected this weekend, and also to kind of preview coming into week 3. So that way you guys can keep an eye out. Kristaps Porzingis, so the Dallas Mavericks, missed his 3rd straight game on Sunday with back tightness. Actively, I am trying to trade Kristaps Porzingis. Another guy who's affectionately known as Mr. Glass has consistently missed games throughout his career. This year already, 6 games in, no different. He's having some back tightness. His next game is Tuesday against Miami. So for Kristaps Porzingis managers, just something to keep an eye on there. Another big name, Zion Williamson. Injury-prone big, just like Kristaps, unfortunately. I love Zion, but it is what it is. He's probably going to miss at least another 2 weeks, considering he hasn't even been cleared for contact yet. They said they were going to do some tests in New Orleans at the end of last week. Still haven't heard back on that. But again, if you have Zion, it's one of those things where you hold tight. I know there was a league that I'm in where he's actually been traded. So again, a lot of unknowns with Zion. I know you had actually had a couple of thoughts on him, Dan. You want to share with some of the listeners?
What do you mean with regards to just like what I said years about him, or like what I said about him years ago, or like right now?
Yeah, I mean a little bit of both. I mean, I do remember having this discussion when he came out of Duke with you about his longevity and durability in the NBA.
So yeah, well, okay, so first things first, I've been reading the reports. He is supposedly rumored to be above 300 pounds. I don't know if you guys have seen the workout clips of him. The guy looks like someone that could be playing in the NFL right now, like a lineman. It's insane just how big he is. I do hope he gets into game shape. I hope that he can perform. I never want any player to like not live up to his potential, and I love everything Zion does. But a couple of years ago, just to give a quick story, Brian and I saw him coming out of Duke, and Brian obviously bought into the hype, as well as did a lot of people. I love his game. I thought he's fantastic. I didn't think that he was the first pick of the draft personally, because I worried about his injuries. I was like, this guy's a freak athlete, but he's huge. Like he looks to me more like an NFL player than an NBA player. And if you're coming into the league that big right out of college, like I compared him kind of to Charles Barkley. Like Charles Barkley came into the league as like kind of big, but then he got bigger. Zion was already big, and then if he gets bigger, it's concerning. So the health thing was always a concern of me, thinking that Zion would be kind of like the face of the league, like down the road, like a Luka or Trae Young, something of that nature. So yeah, I was always really reserved about Zion. I never wanted it to be true, but I was like, man, I'm scared. That was
Yeah.
probably always the word that like I used with him. I was just scared about what might be of him like later down the road, and how long his career might be sustainable for.
If I could ask you a quick question, Dan, on revisionist history with Zion Williamson. If you're New Orleans Pelicans, take yourself back to draft
You
night.
still draft the
John
first
Morant,
overall.
still draft him
Like
first.
so like even though I want to be very, very clear about my stand, even though I think, like I was worried about his career, I was worried about everything that he would be. I don't want to do revisionist history because I know of what Ja is now, but coming into the league, what Ja was that year versus what Zion was, I would still draft Zion first overall, regardless of all the red flags, regardless of all the concerns. This guy was insane, like on every level. Whereas Ja, he's definitely worked on his game, he's progressed, but you didn't know, like you didn't see that level right away. So yeah, even though that's the case, like I would still draft Zion first overall 10 out of 10 times. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Even with what we're seeing from Ja so far this year, I'd still take Zion over Ja as well. I think
And also the
he
fit.
has that start.
Like the fit wouldn't have made sense for New Orleans because they had just gotten Lonzo Ball. So like Ja with Lonzo, it wouldn't make sense. So again, it just it makes more sense with how things played out. And we hope each player the best in their respective situations.
Yeah. And I think another little thing, Zion went to Duke, Ja went to Murray State. Very different college experience, you could say. So I'm sure that played a factor into some GM's thinking as well. So we'll keep moving forward on injuries. Nerlens Noel of the Knicks did not play on Saturday night, and he is questionable for Monday's game against Toronto. He still has not played in any games this season. I know a lot of folks are waiting on him to be available for them to add him. He is still rostered in quite a bit of leagues, as he is obviously a very valuable defensive asset in fantasy. Dylan Brooks, with a hand injury, is projected to return in time for Friday's game against Washington. So they have a couple of games before that, something to keep an eye on, especially I think he's still available in quite a bit of leagues as well. Malcolm Brogdon has been day to day with a hamstring issue, missed the game as well. Something to kind of keep an eye on and monitor. We don't have a lot of information, but they do have him listed as day to day. Brandon Ingram was ruled out late for New Orleans game on Saturday night. Again, someone to keep an eye on. Was it something that just kind of a load management / rest game for a team that didn't think they'd beat the Knicks? Or is this like something to really kind of consider for the rest of the week? We'll kind of have to keep an eye on that. James Wiseman of the Golden State Warriors with a knee injury is expected to make his return within the next couple of weeks. Again, I kind of touched on him before. I wouldn't necessarily touch James Wiseman yet. I'd want to see what he does as far as earning minutes on that Golden State roster before I use a roster spot on him. And then lastly, for the Bucks, we've kind of touched on them in the last couple episodes on the injury report. Drew Holiday and Brook Lopez. They are, again, we're recording Sunday night. They are not playing tonight. So again, keep an eye out. Drew Holiday, according to Mike Budenholzer, is expected to return soon, and there's no timetable for Brook Lopez. So that way, you guys have a little bit of an update going into this week.
Yeah, and very quickly, I want to touch on a player that you mentioned firstly, Kristaps Porzingis. I understand if you used a very high draft pick or spent a lot of capital on him, if you'd want to sell on him, sell low. I think it's a buy low situation though right now because even though Kristaps, regardless of how often injury he is and like just how many games he may miss, he still puts up top 50 production. So if you can get him for the right price, like if you can give two solid players for Kristaps or even a 1-for-1 on a guy that's like playing lights out right now, definitely take it because Kristaps will be, he'll be a headache. I don't want to dispute that. He'll definitely have questionable games where he misses and it has you scrambling. But the games that he does play, he does put up great numbers. So that's just something to keep an eye on, especially as you strategize on what your team can be moving forward.
Something to note real quick with KP, actually. He's from, if I'm not mistaken, he's averaging career lows this year. I know it's only 6 games, but again, career lows in points per game, rebounds per game, and threes made per game, or a 3-point percentage. So again, something to monitor. Not off to a great start. You got to think Luka Doncic is very disappointed, more disappointed than I am even, that he can't get his second guy to give him a decent stat line on a daily basis. It's got to be frustrating for Luka.
I completely agree, but I think that just plays more into the situation of it. Right now is a perfect buy low time on Kristaps Porzingis. I don't know if he'll necessarily get a lot better than what he is right now, but guys, we have to, based off of his last couple of years, like we have to assume he will be putting up better numbers than where he is. Period.
Yeah. And one player that actually stood to benefit from Porzingis being out was Maxi Kleber. We touched on him being one of the top ads in the last episode. In Sunday's game, he actually left early. So ironically, also with a back injury, did not return. So that maybe leads a guy like Dwight Powell to start seeing some minutes in Dallas. So we'll get into the waiver ads for this week, but that's definitely something to note for those of you guys that added Maxi Kleber at the end of this week, Daniel included.
Yep, I definitely bit the bullet on that one. All right, guys. So moving on to the top waiver ads this week, or at least leading into the week. First player on the board was Jordan Poole. He was added in 16.5% of leagues, at least by this metric. Jordan Poole, he should have been on someone's roster by now, so it's kind of shocking that there's still leagues where he's available. Definitely go pick him up. Second player was Monte Morris. With Morris, he had one pretty solid game for the Denver Nuggets. I don't know how sustainable it is. To be quite honest, I don't trust much of that Denver backcourt right now without Jamal Murray. They can all have up and down games, so I don't know if he might be one of the most draw players coming up. LaMarcus Aldridge, he is the third most added player on the list. He did cross that 20,000 point threshold, so props to LA and just this remarkable comeback he's had into the NBA. I don't expect much from him in terms of production fantasy wise moving forward for the Brooklyn Nets. Outside of that two-headed monster, there's not much else going for them on that team. Just some other quick players to note. Tyrese Maxey, again, if he's not rostered right now in your league, definitely go pick him up, starting point guard for the Philadelphia 76ers. And Terence Ross has been putting up solid points for Orlando. I think he is going to probably be trade bait in the upcoming games just because I don't think he's part of Orlando's future long-term plan. So just someone to keep an eye on. And then for the top for the top drops, Malik Beasley was actually leading the way. I think this will probably be reversed after that solid game that he put up recently where he had 6 threes for 18 points. How sustainable is that? I don't really know. The Timberwolves have been one of the more surprising teams. They've been off to a really hot start. Malik Beasley hasn't been a key part of that. So, we don't know essentially how that's going to fare out. And then Eric Bledsoe has been dropped a lot. I think Eric Bledsoe has enough fantasy value to be on someone's, rotation and roster, just given the defensive stats that he can contribute and all-around stats. And then other players include Tim Hardaway Jr., who has, been cold as of late compared to his really hot start, and also Devin Vassell of the San Antonio Spurs, who also kind of cooled down a little bit.
Okay. So I had some quick thoughts on those. Like Jordan Poole, I have him rostered in a league. I thought about dropping him, but then I realized I was like, you know what? He is getting a lot of minutes with Golden State. I don't love his field goal percentage, but he's a good enough still to keep. That isn't a 14-team league, though, so obviously that's going to depend on the league you're in. For Monte Morris in Denver, he is outplaying Facu Campazzo so far. I'm actually kind of surprised by that one, Dan. It seemed like last year Campazzo seemed to be more of the guy in Denver. Obviously, no one is replacing Jamal Murray, but I'm a little surprised that Monte Morris has been outplaying Campazzo. Campazzo's had some really rough stat lines. And then Terence Ross, you brought up a good point. I think he's definitely going to be potentially trade bait for Orlando. Another guy that wasn't on the top waiver ads that I thought about that we've kind of mentioned as potential trade bait that's had some pretty good games here, Cam Reddish. He also led Atlanta in scoring the other night. He is going to be a 3-point streamer, and he's someone that, again, I believe Atlanta is trying to showcase so that they can flip him for more assets for them to kind of build around.
Yeah, really good call-outs. A player I noted this weekend that hadn't played up until recently was Thad Young. Thad Young is not really seen as a player in San Antonio's future plans, but he had a pretty solid stat line. I can't remember right off the top of my head what it was. But again, he hasn't played so far this year, so it was really mind-boggling to see him play. I don't think that he's going to play mini games, if at all. But guys, just monitor his situation because maybe Pop and the team kind of like set him into the lineup. I have the stats right now. He had 10 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals. So if he's on the waiver wire for a lot of people, he's rostered in 27% of leagues in Yahoo. So again, guys, just someone to monitor. He might be a top waiver ad moving forward.
I wanted to touch on Thad Young there. He had that stat line in just 17 minutes, guys. 17 minutes of play. He got you 10 points, 8 boards. Like that. That's a guy that is. He's worth trading for, I believe. I really think he is going to get dealt. San Antonio, I don't think is an organization that's known for keeping guys on their roster just to have them. I think they're obviously showcasing him just enough to where other teams can kind of keep an eye on him. But man, Thad Young is definitely a valuable fantasy asset once he gets traded to a team that actually has minutes for him. So definitely good stuff all around there. And obviously, as we've kind of gone over waiver ads and drops, we're going to go into this. We're going to go in depth on the schedule for week 3. I'm going to try to give you guys some of my useful tips and tricks that I use to kind of help build out my roster on a per week basis. So for week 3, it's an even split as far as 3 games played versus 4 games played for teams. 16 of the teams are playing 4 games, and then 14 teams are playing just 3. I'm going to list out the teams that are playing 4 games. They are the Atlanta Hawks, the Boston Celtics, the Charlotte Hornets, the Cleveland Cavs, the Houston Rockets, the Indiana Pacers, the LA Clippers, the New York Knicks, the Orlando Magic, the Philadelphia 76ers, Portland Trailblazers, Sacramento Kings, San Antonio Spurs, Toronto Raptors, Utah Jazz, and Washington Wizards. And then the teams that are playing just 3 games this week: the Brooklyn Nets, Chicago Bulls, Dallas Mavericks, Denver Nuggets, Detroit Pistons, Golden State Warriors, the LA Lakers, the Memphis Grizzlies, the Miami Heat, Milwaukee Bucks, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the New Orleans Pelicans, the OKC Thunder, and the Phoenix Suns. So, what does that mean? So I wrote down a couple of things that are going to be interesting to note when it comes to this week for scheduling purposes, and something that can kind of help you guys with your ads and drops for the week as you kind of strategize to optimize your fantasy lineups. So the Houston Rockets and Utah Jazz kind of have a backloaded schedule this week in particular. Those 2 teams play Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you have a borderline rosterable player in your waivers on either of those teams, Houston or Utah, definitely might be worth dropping them and then try to picking them back up Wednesday or Thursday. That way you can get 3 games in 4 nights out of one of those players on those 2 teams. The Pistons, Grizzlies, Timberwolves, and Pelicans all have their last game of the week on Friday night. So none of those 4 teams have Saturday or Sunday games. So again, when it comes down to those nitty gritty weekend pickups, you want to try to steer clear of Detroit, Memphis, Minnesota, and New Orleans this week. They have no games after Friday. The Brooklyn Nets and Golden State Warriors do not play Monday or Tuesday. So feel free, those borderline rosterable guys, if you just want to have them sit on your bench for the first 2 days of the week, by all means. But I definitely think there's some other teams that you could kind of keep an eye out that would get you more value. OKC has 2 back-to-back days off this week. They're off Tuesday, Wednesday, and they're off Friday, Saturday. So again, they're one of those teams that are just playing 3 games this week. That's definitely something to keep in mind. Also, OKC's been very inconsistent with who's been playing. There really hasn't been a steady influx of valuable fantasy assets outside of SGA on that team. So again, not really worth rostering too many Thunder this week. And then the Bulls, Mavs, and Nuggets are all off Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, which means they only play Saturday. So again, those are guys that I would kind of consider, if they're borderline rosterable, I would consider potentially dropping them if they play for Chicago, Dallas, or Denver. Thursday is a really light day this week. There's only 5 games total. So definitely any players of teams that are playing Thursday this week are going to add instant value for you since there's just not as many games. Wednesday night is going to be the busiest night of the week with 11 games. So again, kind of keep that in mind. Try not to double dip and have too many players where they're just going to sit on the bench because you've already used all your roster spots. And then lastly, teams playing Thursday that you could utilize to kind of take advantage of that being a really light day: Atlanta, Boston, Houston, Philly, Utah, Detroit, the LA Lakers, Miami, OKC, and Phoenix. Those are all guys that I'm definitely going to keep an eye on. So that way I can probably get a little bit of an advantage in having them play on Thursday games.
Yeah, overall, guys, the biggest takeaway from this is those weekend games you have to really keep an eye on, especially to Brian's points. If you have players that are borderline rosterable, but you're down in a couple categories with enough space to make it up, depending on who's playing and who's available on your waiver wire, go ahead and pull the trigger. That definitely helps you win the week. And if the player is not that valuable to your team, it might make or break your week. So just something to keep an eye on with that schedule. All right, guys. So moving on, the next segment is our ice cold / hot hand segment. So it's where we give you one player from each one player from each category on who we think is going to have either a great week or a pretty rough week given their schedule. So I'll kick it off with my ice cold player nomination. I have Jonas Valanciunas of the New Orleans Pelicans. So JV's been off to a great start so far this year. I think that with Zion being out, he's definitely performing better than any of us would have expected. But having said that, I think that he's kind of in for kind of a tough, a tough break this week. To give you guys some context, the Pelicans only play 3 games this week, and they're all tough matchups for a big. They play the Suns, the Kings, and the Warriors. With the Suns, JV's going up against a motivated DeAndre Ayton, who's putting up a solid double-double, and the Phoenix Suns defense has been pretty good for the most part when it comes to interior presence. Then with the Kings, you have Rashawn Holmes being the matchup, who's been having a great double-double as well, and also blocking 2 shots per game. And then when you look at that Golden State Warriors matchup, sometimes they're going to put Draymond on the 5 against Jonas Valanciunas, and they've held all their opponents to low rebounds, low field goal percentage. So overall, I just think that it's a rough matchup for JV, who as of right now is averaging 19 points and 14 boards. I just don't know if this week he's going to have such a hot week.
That would be, hey, it wouldn't surprise me. I think some of it does have to do, though, for me, if Brandon Ingram plays. I think BI is going to be fine, but obviously, if Ingram misses any games this week, I think that's just going to help Valanciunas. Obviously, he's dominating the boards. I was watching their game Saturday against the Knicks, and Valanciunas definitely played a lot of minutes. He's been like their main guy. They fed him in the post, so I'll be curious to see if you're right on that
I
one,
have
Ben.
a gut feeling. I could be wrong. I definitely would want to be wrong. I definitely would want JV to put up crazy numbers. I just don't know how sustainable that is with this week, and especially given the fact that the Pelicans, I believe, are one of the worst teams in the NBA right now in terms of just standing. So maybe they try to switch it up. And then with my hot hand player of the week, I have Michael Porter Jr. So I expect Michael Porter Jr. to kind of pick it up this week. You know, the Nuggets play the Grizzlies twice this week, and the Grizzlies are known as the team that allows the second most points in the league. They also allow some of the most threes, field goal percentage, and just in general shooting percentages. So I expect Michael Porter Jr. to eat. And also, they're playing a rebuilding Rockets team that's kind of in the middle of the pack when it comes to defensive efficiency, and they allow some of the most threes and rebounds. So, you know, Michael Porter Jr. is only putting up 11 points and 6 boards this season. He's a player that I think everyone's expecting to pick it up. I think that this is a week he does pick it up.
Yeah, I know a couple fantasy managers that are a little disappointed with
I am one
MPJ's
of
start to
them.
the
So
season. Exactly. From an efficiency standpoint, it's just been really surprising. I'd be shocked if he doesn't turn around. This is definitely a good week. I think, like kind of how you mentioned, this is a good week for him to take over. But Will Barton, man, he's been a surprise over there in Denver. It seems like he's been kind of picking up some of the slack points wise. So we'll see. But I think I definitely could see MPJ having a big week this week. So I'll get into my nominations for the week. So for Ice Cold, someone we touched on earlier, I have Tim Hardaway Jr. So THJ and the Mavericks are currently last in the NBA with 97 points per game. They have Luka Doncic, and they're averaging 97 points per game, last in the NBA. You would think playing off of Luka would lead to kind of increased efficiency due to easier shots, but that's just not the case. THJ has actually been held under 10 points in 2 of his last games, and he hasn't really contributed in many other counting stats either, which he's not really known for anyway. Only has 3 games this week, so again, not a ton of opportunities to even make an impact for your roster this week. It's also going to have a tough back-to-back against Miami and San Antonio, who are definitely known for their defensive prowess. I'd be willing to gamble that THJ is going to be in for another rough week again. And then for the hot hand, I had Dejounte Murray of the San Antonio Spurs. A proud Dejounte Murray manager. He has definitely rewarded the faith, unlike Michael Porter Jr. The Spurs play 4 games this week. Their competition is not as stiff as THJ's. They're playing the Mavericks, the Pacers, the Magic, and the Thunder. Most of them not known for playing defense at all. Dejounte is off to a red-hot start for San Antonio as the number 1 guy. He's averaging 17.8 points per game, 8.8 assists per game, and 8.5 rebounds per game with 2.2 steals. All career highs. Obviously, not a huge sample size, but definitely great start for Dejounte Murray. You can expect another red-hot week from him this week, in my opinion, based off the schedule
I
that he has
completely
coming
agree
up.
with you. I think you and I discussed it in our award nominations episode where Dejounte Murray could easily be in that discussion of most improved player this year because he's going to have the potential to put up all-star caliber numbers. So I completely agree with you on his just opportunity to have one of the hotter weeks this week. And with Tim Hardaway Jr., this man is as cold and as hot when it comes to his shot as any other NBA player. So it would not surprise me if he goes into the week with a cold hand and just kind of rides it out. So definitely two great nominations. But guys, that does it for us. Again, just kind of our preview episode for this week 3. We're very excited to see the NBA keep going. In terms of just again content, please let us know what your thoughts. If you're enjoying the new content, what you think of the segments. Interact with us on social, whether it be through our Twitter, through our Instagram, or even through our Gmail account. Just let us know your thoughts and just in general your take on these things. And then when it comes to our podcast episodes, they are live on all streaming services. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever. Definitely give us a follow so that you're up to date and notified when the latest episode drops. And with our YouTube videos, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, like them, comment on them. It definitely helps the algorithm. And in general, we just appreciate all the feedback that you can give us. Until next time, guys, my name's Danny. This is Brian. Take it easy. Thank you guys so much.